And for all those that are joining us on online live stream, welcome, and we hope that you enjoy the show. Also, I think, what's the Twitter hashtag? There's a
ACCJ, hashtag ACCJ.
Hashtag ACCJ, so there's also, this is, if you want to tweet this as well, please do. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, are you ready to rumble? In this corner, started studying Japanese before I was born. In 1964, came here in 1969, inspired by the Olympics, I think. The Japan Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics. Out of Australia, William Hall. And in this corner, recently shifting gears in his life with 28 years, and is that correct, 28 years in McCain Erickson? Japan for 11 years, currently living in Hong Kong. Next stop, who knows? The adventure begins. From Australia, Super Wave Dave. And in this corner, wearing some very cool shoes. Out of Germany, with celebrating his 30-year anniversary here in Japan. With a lot of history and a lot of background and done many, many things. Out of Germany, Jesper Koll. So all three of these guys were speakers at TEDx Tokyo. And we got together and just started having a chat about what we could do together. And the concept of having kind of a very TED and TEDx events are 3-minute to 18-minute talks. Very short. And we thought, let's see if we could make it even shorter. If you've heard any of these three guys present, for them to talk for a minute or 2 minutes or 30 seconds is almost impossible. However, we were able to pull it off last time when we did the ABCs. Who was here for that last event, the ABC event? So there's a few of you. Yes, do you remember ABCs? What were the?
I was lucky because AE at the time, Mr. Abe just showed up. So it was Abenomics, Bubble, and Consumer.
Mine was pretty straightforward. It was all about aging, beauty, and consumer differences that were going on.
Bill?
I don't remember.
So let's get this kick-started, and let's start with, let's hope Bill remembers what he's going to say today. Let's start with D and Bill.
Okay, so can I have a slide there? Actually, this is sort of a segue into D. Unfortunately, we don't have a big slide. We thought we were going to have one. It's dementia, right?
Oh, how ironic is that?
How ironic is that, indeed, right? So this is this week's Shukan Daimondo, right? And it's telling you there 1 person in 3 is going to have Alzheimer's over the age of 65 by the year 2025. I mean, this is a staggering statistic. So at the end of January, the Japanese government has created a national plan for Alzheimer's, right? This will be the test case for the world for how do we handle Alzheimer's. You just jump to the next slide. So you can see there we already have 4 million people. By the year 2025, we will have 7 million. And if you then add to the next slide, you'll see if you put in sort of mild cognitive impairment, which means it probably between when you forget things that you get to 65 and when you actually get Alzheimer's, there's another 50% chance of getting Alzheimer's. We will have 13 million people with Alzheimer's. Right? What is that going to do for your companies? Right? Usually the ladies have to retire and look after the oldies. If you're in banks, you're going to have a problem now because they're coming in and they lose their money, they can't find it. If you're Aeon or supermarkets, you have to have people who know how to handle. So the Orange Plan will have, by 2017, 4 million people who have been trained, sorry, 8 million people who will be trained with a little orange band. How do I handle Alzheimer's people? That's it for me, thank you. Done. Okay. Next slide. I'm on time?
You're perfect.
Wow.
Skip that one. Okay.
All right, Dave.
Down to earth. You've probably all been reading the last 6 to 12 months about a trend that's going on amongst market researchers across all sorts of research to find that there's around 40% of the Japanese population who now agree with a statement that runs something like, you don't have to worry about pressure or social expectations. It's okay not to expect much in life and just to put up with whatever it is that's provided. 40% of people basically, their approach to down to earth is, nah, don't try too hard, it's not worth it anymore. And I marry that with another statistic. For McCaughan, the company I'm in the process of leaving, we've just been done the 11th year in a row of a piece of research where we've been tracking mothers across Japan for 11 years. And in that research, we divide them then into, based on their habits of shopping, expectations, etc., into 5 archetypes. One of those archetypes we call unconcerned mothers. And unconcerned mothers basically are women who basically don't give a shit about anything, excuse the language. 2 Australians
This
on
is
the
being
audience.
live streamed, you know.
2 Australians on the audience. One of us is going to be a swearer, I can tell you. So I beat you to it, Bill. But anyway, so, 20% now of housewives in Japan, as opposed to the other types, which are women who like to buy things luxuriously, or women who are really, driven by impulse purchase, or the 40% who basically think that trying to save another yen is their goal in life. But there are now 20% who basically have given up altogether. I'll buy whatever's there, I don't care. I'll shop for whatever's there around, whatever we need, I don't care. I'm not going to pay much attention, I don't care. The important thing with that is that 20% is the highest it's been in the 11 years that we've been tracking it. And
30
it's been growing
seconds.
significantly.
30 seconds.
So, down to earth or I've given up. Which way do you want to approach these numbers?
Jesper.
Well, for a Japan economist, the D is easy. We used to talk about triple D, debt, deflation, and demographics as the big obstacles. But that's the last 20 years. I want to talk about deflation. Lots of you have lived through this, and we've seen Japan being the one country where we have had consistent deflation over the last 30 years. What is interesting, though, there is something very positive that is actually coming out of all of this. You may recall that Japan is actually the only country in the world where the ruling elite burst a bubble economy. In December 1989, the Bank of Japan elected a new governor, Governor Mieno, and his first public speech went something like this. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for appointing me to this important position. Second sentence. Bad things are happening in my country. A graduate from the best university, working for the best company in Japan, can no longer dream to ever be able to afford buying an apartment within a 2-hour commute. This is bad for the country, this is bad for society, this is bad for the economy, and whoopsie-doop. He started raising interest rate, he started bursting the bubble. The good news is that today, affordability has risen to a 3-generation high. So if you are a young Japanese, if you are a graduate of a good university, you find that you can very much so afford buying a home within a 20-minute commute. Just to give you the numbers, at the peak of the bubble, it cost you 22 years of your average salary in Tokyo to buy the average apartment. Today, that is down to 4.5 years, so deflation was terrible and difficult, and all of us had to sweat very hard to survive, but there is a good part to it. Now, Japan has actually leveled the playing field, and the young generation of Japan, not old people like you, Bill, can actually thrive.
So, what's the next letter? Anybody help me with that?
It's the alphabet. Think about it.
Oh, so 2 minutes. So each one of these is 2 minutes. So let's go with Jesper.
Me again. God, this is so people get used to a German accent. Okay, so E is for employment. I think that Japan is at the beginning of a revolution. When you look at employment in Japan, people wax romantically about the salary man. This is not the reality of Japan. Today, 40% of the people who receive a paycheck are hisei-shain. They are part or contract workers. 20 years ago, that was only 20%. But what is happening now? Now, Japan has a very, very tight labor market. In fact, one of my favorite statistics in Japan is the fact that over the next 5 years, every year, the number of high school and university graduates will be declining by 250,000. And as a result of that, I want to be reborn as a 23-year-old Japanese because my wage, my employment conditions are going to be bid up. So what will happen now? The buffer that Japan has is you've got 40% of the people now on a part-time, on a hisei-shain type of work condition. As the labor market is very tight, what is happening is that more and more companies are rehiring their part-time workers on a full-time basis. That is the dynamics that is actually turning Japan around. And in my opinion, we will have Japan as the only G7 country where a new middle class is going to become through. Quick point. What, or as I should say in Frankfurt, what is the difference between a part-time worker and a full-time worker? There's a couple. The first one is income. You find that as a part-time worker, you do not have access to the bonus that the company pays. So automatically you become a full-time worker, you do get the bonus, which means annual income goes up by about 35%. The second thing that happens, your non-wage benefits, national pension, national health care, goes up by about 15%. So your total income, part versus a full, is basically 50% higher. The second thing that happens, as a part-timer, love or money does not buy you credit. You cannot get a loan. But as a full-time worker, you can actually get a loan. So I got higher income, plus I get access to credit. And then finally, a very important thing, because Japanese girls are very smart. As a part-time worker, you can get a date, but you will never be able to get married. So I expect, if I'm right, and this inflection actually happens, you get more and more part-time workers becoming full-time workers, I do expect that marriage is going to start to take off, and we will solve the population problem as well. Thank you.
How does it feel? For years you were one of the few optimists on Japan. It must be kind of nice to still be an optimist in today's world in Japan.
Oh, I mean, it's fantastic to be an optimist, even though I must say I hate Abenomics. Because in my 30 years in Japan, I never had to work as hard as I have today, because there's all these unsuspecting people from, you know, the Kansas pension fund who never heard about Japan, who all of a sudden wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning to ask me whether they should buy Datsun. Remember Datsun? No, no. Youngers.
All right, 2 minutes, Bill. E.
Okay, E. Can we switch on the... So E, I was looking through the newspapers and I found Eren, which is an English name, but written in Japanese characters. A meaning eternal and Ren meaning Renai from love, eternal love. I said, okay, maybe this is for the firstborn babies, right? So I then went and checked out this very nice database. I went back 100 years to 1912 and looked at what is the firstborn, number one firstborn name of boys and girls, right? Unfortunately, the slide's too small, but 1912, it was the first year of Taisho. So Taisho, so Shoichi was the firstborn number one in 1912. Just by chance, second year was Shoni, and then Shosan. And if you just follow down through, then you get to World War II. The top three names were Isamu, bravery, Susumu, advance, and Katsu, to win, right? Then you come through all the way through, and you come down to the modern, to around 2000, and the names change, right? To end of the millennium, soaring, shore, you know, the sort of soaring off into the sky, right? And we come then to 2014, for the first time we see the boy's name is called Ren, and the girl's name is called Rin. The two or three things. One is, this is the first time ever we've had boys and girls' name both in one syllable in 100 years, the number one name. The boy's name Ren is lotus, and the girl's name Rin is like ice cold, right? So,
Bright future there.
yeah, so then I said, my God, this is getting more and more interesting as we go on, right? Why would you want to name your boy Lotus? I mean, he comes to Australia, he goes to play rugby. Man, he's going to be in some serious, serious shit, right? I mean, so...
Second swear word.
And the girl, you know, why would you know, to your point, why would you have Lotus Boy and, you know, Ice Queen, you know? How are they going to improve the marriage and have babies? I'm sorry, I have to contradict you completely, right? So I then checked it out again, and then did look through some blogs written by the ladies. In the old days, you would ask your grandparents or you get the priest in the local temple. Nowadays, it's the mothers who are mainly doing these naming, right? And so it said, one lady said, well, a lotus has deep roots in mud, right? But also produces a beautiful flower. So therefore, it seems to me then my son could suffer through this difficult life. He's probably a part-time worker, but eventually will build himself a beautiful career in life, right? The rin, which is, it usually in Japanese like rinretsu, which is really severe cold, or rinzen taru, but there's another way of saying ririshi, with the same Chinese characters, and that means manly or that sort of stuff, right? So it used in the old days about the samurais. But now it's taken on rintoshita as a girl, which means you can become sort of cool, commanding, etc., right? You can make decisions, you know, kiriste gomen, maybe type stuff, you know. So this is an interesting combination, right? And so you sort of wonder what's going to happen. But finally, I thought international, the last lady said, well, actually it has hibikigai, it has a good sound, it's very short, it can pronounce both in English and Japanese, or if you live overseas, you can use the same name. So I think this could help my children to grow up to be somewhat international. So maybe there's a hope for internationalization. That's my comment from the names.
So if you think about, we've been talking about for 5 years or more, the concept of carnivorous women is a big thing in Japan. And then the reaction to that of herbivorous men. Well, those are the people that are now having those kids by the names that Bill's just indicated. Right? So it's all coming through about, yeah, they are carnivorous women who are naming their daughters, go on, be a steely bitch, it's okay. And the men are saying, look, I'm going to call you Lotus because you're going to be like me, a total loser. But that's okay.
And on that note, let's shift over to you and F. And F. Well, do you have a job still?
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't matter anymore. So, you know, when you listen to Bill, you know, for a guy that's 110 years old, he's quite energetic, and that's appropriate. Because I want to talk about energetic. So again, for years now, McCaughan has been doing this study. One of the things we ask people across the country of all ages is, what's the word that you would use defines you and your life today? Now, you'll not be surprised to find that in the most recent survey, across Japan, I should say, across all ages, the most common words were anxiety. I describe myself as anxious or having anxiety. Or the second most popular was a word associated with freedom, but it was like, I'm looking for some sort of freedom from the situation I'm in. Or effort, as in, I've just got to put in a lot more effort to survive. All age groups, male and female, except the 55 to 70-year-olds. The number one term by a long way was energetic. I'm feeling more and more energetic. The only people in this country with a genuine, popular, mass positive outlook on life are people 55 plus. And they are truly feeling energetic, they're feeling lucky, they're feeling like I can look forward to the future and move forward. Now, of course, there's lots of exceptions, but as a generation, And I go back to the theme I mentioned when we did the ABCs. People like you, all of you, in my experience in 10, 12 years of dealing with companies in Japan, constantly belittle and ignore the only true growth market for the next 5 years. Goes to my friend's point over here about employment. If you're a 23-year-old, get yourself trained to take care of old people. It's the growth business of this country. If you're in manufacturing, find a way to sell stuff to people that are 55 plus. It's the growth sector. If you're going to do services, what are you doing to service those people? And we're not talking about geriatric homes. We're not talking about insurance companies about, you know, medical insurance for when you spend the last year in hospital. We're talking about active, the healthiest generation of 50 to 70-year-olds humankind has ever known, with the highest per capita pension funds in the world. What are you guys doing? Why do you care about people under 40? Don't target them. That's a waste of time and money. Your growth area is people 55 plus, and they're dying to hear more from you.
And will they feel such freedom if they don't have a pension?
You did me at the beginning. What?
Will they feel such freedom if they don't have a pension when they get old enough?
They will have a pension.
Well, there's the optimist again. Huh? Everything's fine. They will have a pension. All right, let's shift over to F and let's give it a go.
Okay, let me ask a simple question. When you forget Facebook, Twitter, all that, fooling yourself, how many friends do you really have? So we asked this question around the world, 40 plus countries. We asked the question, how many friends do you really have? In the United States, the average answer was 7. Okay, the average answer in the UK was 4. Japan was 4. Of the 40 plus countries, Japan and the UK were the least number of real friends that people feel they have. Just 4. What is that telling us about what's going on? Well, you know, it's probably tied to another thing we found out. I'm sure that I'm looking across the room at all the men, forgive me ladies, but I'm sure all the men in the room are true romantics, right? How many times in the last week have you said, I love you to somebody? Not just your wife, but...
Is that an open-ended question?
Yeah. I know in Patrick's case, it was 12 times last night, but that's different.
I'm a very loving person.
Okay. Again, 40 plus countries around the world. The average around the world was around 8 times. So have you said I love you to 8 times in the last week? That would be the global average. The United States sat at somewhere around 12. Argentinians, if there's one in the room, were the top, 28 times in a week. I asked, and somebody from Argentina told me that could be to 28 different people. But we're a very manly yeah, it doesn't matter. Japanese, by far, last. Once. If at all. If at all, once. Loneliness. Friends are really important, but what we forget is the opposite of friends is loneliness. And this is a country that is suffering terribly from loneliness, and loneliness is growing astronomically in this country. The number of single households is going through the roof, and will continue to go to the roof because of an ageing society in the next few years. And that means more and more lonely people who are looking for somebody, maybe not to declare their love to, but at least declare friendship with, to share a hug with, to share something with. Now, it's all very well. Of course, a lot of companies are taking advantage of the single homes. We've seen things like the PB line from 7-Eleven, etc. We've seen Panasonic bring out, you know, the little mini dishwasher that only takes 3 pieces of cutlery and 3 plates. Boom products. They've all worked really well because we've got a lot more single households. But think again about the marketing opportunities that people are looking for to get together with other people, to feel some sort of interaction. And what's really important about that was, in the survey we've been doing, we've done 15 rounds of surveys since the triple disaster, asking people how they think their life has changed or been affected by the triple disaster. One of the things we found is more than at any time in the last 3 years, people are saying, I think it's really important to actually have a face-to-face, real-life conversation with somebody every day.
Thank you. I'm hesitant to throw the letter F over here for obvious reasons. Give it a go.
I'll keep it clean then. Okay. So what about fuel cell vehicles, right? How's that? Is that clean enough?
A sweat there for a second.
Okay. So as you remember, Toyota has just announced the Mirai at the end of last year. They've announced they're going to give out 5,000 patents throughout the world to help grow fuel cell vehicles. So we just did a study. Unfortunately, as the slides, I'm going to blame the American Chamber. If we get some decent slide machines, you know. So we did, for this particular presentation, we did a study in US and Japan. And today was the announcement of it, but thank you, I can't see the slides. So I'll explain the slides. So we have a database which we have 30,000 case studies for high technology products on non-fast moving consumer goods. We tested with a general sample in the United States and in Japan. United States basically said, who cares? Right? We're not interested in a Mirai. We've got gasoline prices coming down. There's these big monster trucks we want to drive. We don't give a shit about fuel cell vehicles, right? Japan, of the general population, big chunk said, yes, we're really interested. And then we also interviewed a group of people who want to spend more than 3 million yen on a new car in the next couple of years. 70% of those say they want to buy some eco-type vehicle, hybrid or whatever, right? And then we did a future acceleration concept, like 5 years in the future, there will be this many stands where you can fill up with hydrogen. Safety has been solved. The Olympic Games, as you know, the Olympic Village will all have done by hydrogen now, with the pipes coming into the Olympic Village, and so it will be actually all hydrogen. Everybody says they want to buy. So we have a winner in Japan coming out of hydrogen vehicles, right? US is going to stay gasoline. Europe probably will stay diesel. China, we don't know. Maybe electric, because there's so much pollution that could be electric. But anyway, that's where we're looking right now.
Thank you.
Japan definitely is fuel cells.
Thank you. Jesper, F?
I'll be, since I'm always optimistic, the dark side of the empire is fiscal, F for fiscal, fiscal as in deficit. Yes, there's a lot of debt. And it's a little bit disconcerting that the deficit in Japan at the start of Prime Minister Abe was 11% of GDP. Since then, we've had a huge slingshot with the economy going from negative nominal growth, and nominal growth is what collects tax revenues, right? From nominal growth from negative to positive 1.5%. But despite that, the borrowing requirement, the fiscal deficit, is still today running at about 7% of GDP. We've increased taxes, but we're not done yet. The problem is that you've got a huge deficit, and as a result of that, you will see further tax increases in Japan coming through. Let me give you our numbers. To stop debt to GDP, debt to income from increasing, and to actually start to pay back, or to be able to pay back some debt, this country would need to see nominal income growth of about 7% and a value-added tax of about 19%. So I'm very optimistic, but let's hope that the tax increases are not going to be coming soon.
Great. I'm excited. So let's shift to numbers. Let's go for the number 45, and Bill.
I had another slide there for this one. 45% of married couples are not having any sex. That's my number, right? It's gone up per 12% over the last 8 or 10 years. When asked why, the men say, "Matskareta, I'm so tired from working too hard." The women say, "Mendokusai," which means, you know, it's too bothersome or irksome. That's my number.
Jesper?
Since the fiscal thing was so depressing, 45 is my favorite number of Japan. 45% of Japanese over the age of 20 have no debt, neither credit card nor mortgage, but those 45% of Japanese own fair and square, without debt, the home that they're living in. This is enormous. In the United States, this number obviously is negative.
Bill came up with this 45 thing because he just wanted to tell you the sex story, right? I couldn't think of a 45, but I got to 42. So in the surveys that we, not the sex thing related, in the surveys we've been doing since the triple disaster, as I said, nearly 15 rounds now, and one of the things we look at is how do you feel about spending money on luxury items? And luxury items are defined as going on a holiday, a daily luxury, nothing too expensive, maybe you're buying a bottle of wine, a box of chocolates, things like that. 42% of people in a later survey said, oh no, I'm not considering doing any of that sort of stuff. 42%. Now the interesting thing about that is, that's the highest since June 2011, since 3 months after the earthquake. It went down and now it's come right back up again. There's a big chunk of people just don't want to spend money on anything they can afford.
Wow.
That's depressing.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Kevin, can you jump back into
No sex,
optimism, please?
no sex, no sex, and not buying anything for fun, but very rich. Seems like.
Well, no sex, don't want to buy anything for fun, and I don't want to tell you I love you. So, you know, it's not, you know, this is, imagine living with these people, you know.
So I've got a bunch of numbers here, and I'm going to have, actually I'm going to ask Roger, I'm just going to put them on the table here and just kind of mix through and grab a number, and then I'll pick somebody. Okay. 33.3.
So that's 1/3, that's me. Japan went ex-nuke, and despite Japan going ex-nuke, you find that, you know, the surge in imports that pushed Japan from a trade surplus into a deficit, only about 33% can be explained by the increase in energy imports. The remaining 2/3 of the turn from trade surplus to deficit is captured imports. It is Japanese companies producing in their factories in Asia and pulling the products back into Japan. So it's very interesting. The turn from trade surplus to trade deficit is not because of Japan having gone ex-nuke. It is because Japan has become global.
Right, next number. 36 and Dave.
36. If I, this is a very international audience, obviously, for obvious reasons. So if I asked you, you know, do you believe that you belong to just one country or culture? Of course, I would expect all of you to say no, right? We asked people in 40 countries, do you believe that you belong to just one country and culture? The average around the world ran at around 40% of people who said, no, I belong to more than one country and culture. In the United States, it ran at 34% of people said, I belong to more than one country and culture. What do you think it was in Japan?
99.
No, 36% of people said, I don't belong to one country and culture. It was actually almost the global average. It was actually higher than the United Kingdom. Okay. 1/3 of the Japanese population believe that they belong to more than one country or culture. Now, that's obviously cultural factors. They see themselves as part of a global culture. They belong to partly American culture or partly Korean culture, and the influences those things have on them. We're not as insular as we think in Japan.
And I think the foreign population here is what, 1.4%, something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Next number. 300, and I guess Bill is left, so 300.
300. Okay.
Do you remember what 300?
Yes. 300 is
Friday, Bill.
close to the number of the speed of approval of new drugs after application to the PMDA. Japan, as you know, has famously had a drug lag in Japan, where cancer drugs would come on the market 3 to 5 years in the US and 2 to 3 to 5 years. Japan now is actually faster than the United States and about 10 months faster than Europe. So since It's a radical change since Dr. Kondo has taken over the PMDA, and Abe has focused and said healthcare will be a growth industry for Japan. And for obvious reasons we've talked about, Alzheimer's being one, other types of stuff we can talk about later on. But this is a radical transformation of the healthcare industry and the drug industry. This is now the best place to be in the pharmaceutical business, right, in the world.
Huh, something positive.
Yeah.
We know where to get our drugs now.
Yeah. Not your type, Patrick, not your type.
Behave yourself. I'm just the moderator here, okay? Be nice to me. So the next idea we thought would be fun is to show a slide. And last time we had a slide, and this time we're going to have another slide, which is a crossover slide. And I think it's Jesper? Yes.
Okay, in the vein of positive, this is crossover. This is this is a 19th century industry. This is Japan being unbelievably innovative. Shipbuilding. What do you see? You see that Japan is back to being the largest shipbuilder in the world. What you see is that, you know, Japan lost out to the People's Republic of China about 15 years ago. Since then, here, over the last 3 or 4 years, you see a massive comeback from the Japanese shipbuilders. Why is that? Because these days you need smart, or rather eco-friendly ships. Running a ship is expensive, so you need hybrid engines, you need smart engines. The Japanese shipbuilding industry has continued relentlessly to invest in building and inventing the best and most energy efficient engines. On top of that, we've had a huge tightening of rules and regulations. Ships are stinkpots. CO2 emissions have been curtailed very aggressively. And again, the Japanese are the one country that has aggressively invested in actually cutting CO2 emissions for ships very dramatically. So here you see a wonderful example. I often get accused, oh, how can you be so optimistic on Japan? This is a country that hasn't invented anything since the Sony Walkman. Well, if you're in the shipbuilding business, this is the place to be, because they've got the best and most economically efficient ships in the world.
Great. Bill?
You put mine up then? So this is traffic accidents. You know, normally, in most countries of the world, people under the age of 25 can't get insurance, particularly boys, because they drive like maniacs and kill themselves, right? So in Japan, more people over the age of 65 are now dying in traffic accidents than the under 25. So the crossover has already happened, right? I mean, staggering statistic, right? And now, why is that happening? Partly because of Alzheimer's, people, you know, going. I mean, if you think about this, you know, Toyota and everybody else has been looking to grow autonomous driving vehicles for quite a long time. Because if you think about it, you're going to have 40 million Japanese driving down the street with no reflexes, right? You've got very poor eyesight as you get older, right? And a potential, you know, early onset Alzheimer's. I mean, this is, you know, clearly a major crossover here, right? That's my crossover slide.
Dave?
This is an interesting year, 45 years of age.
Paul?
The new Dankai, the Dankai junior generation, the children of the original Dankai, the women of that age group start to turn 45 en masse this year. And what does that mean? Well, it means for the beauty business, massive changes are in place, because that's been the core generation that has driven beauty trends for the last 25 years in this country. Through at the boom, the crossover into the down years, etc., it's been following those women as they age and their beauty needs, etc. And every major trend has come from them. So the Otana trend that is sort of popular amongst them about, let's be sort of socially responsible, let's be calm about all this sort of stuff, let's be happy with who we are at 45 and not try to pretend we're younger, just be happy with who we are and present ourselves in the best possible way. That's the trend for today.
Great. So, random letter. Rick, give us a random letter. I didn't say Rick, said give us a random letter.
How about Q?
Oh, you're mean. You're mean.
What is the Q? Oh, that's Q. Q is definitely money.
That's your Q.
That is my Q. That Q is
He's on fire.
Q is what? What is Q? Q is, huh?
Quota.
Quota. He's obviously a trade guy. No, Q is quantitative easing. Quantitative easing. You know, all central banks are doing it. It was invented in the Bank of Japan. If you are bored at your next conference call with New York headquarters, Google, you know, quantitative ease, and you'll find that the first definition in the Old English Dictionary is a bowel movement. So the central banks are bowel moving money. Does it do anything? Well, I'm German. Money does not create economic growth. There's a lot of money floating around, but for all intents and purposes, growth, you know, comes from something else. Growth comes from innovation, as well as growth comes from incomes. And I come back to my point. The big difference is that, yes, the European Central Bank is conducting massive quantitative ease, but the difference is that in Japan, you actually have rising incomes because the labor market is getting very tight, while in Europe, you've got falling incomes, so there's a lot more bowel movements that need to happen. Thank you.
Okay.
Bill? Q.
Q. Okay, I'm in market research. More about questionnaires.
Okay,
so
questionnaires. Q,
let's talk a little bit about scales that are used in questionnaires. And this is interesting because Americans start from the extremes. You have 0 to 10, so they start from 10 and they always go from 0 and go to the middle. The Japanese always start in the middle and go slightly up and hardly ever give a negative rating. So this has important implications when you're in cross-country cultural studies, or if you're in your own company, you have to report back. You have your employee satisfaction or your customer satisfaction. Always head office says, why the hell is Japan so low? You know, everyone else is getting a 9 out of 10. All of you Japanese people, let's change the management because you people have no idea how to run a business, right? It's not because you don't know how to run the business, it's because the way Japanese use scales is different, right? That's my cue.
Okay.
Q. Q is a pain. All right, I'll cheat a bit. I'll use Uniqlo, okay?
Is that okay?
So so what I really do is I help create brand stories, right? And Uniqlo's got a great brand story. So remember I told you about this global survey, 40 plus countries. If we ask people around the world, what is the global brand you trust the most and what is the local brand you trust the most? Now around the world, the global brands that people most trust in nearly every country was some combination of Nike, Apple, Coke, McDonald's. Okay, great for Americans, right? Not Japan. Number one global brand that Japanese people say they would trust is Uniqlo. It happens to also be the number one local brand they said they trusted, Uniqlo. Now, what does that really mean? Well, what becomes really interesting with that is when you then look at a different set of data that sort of tells you, okay, so if we ask you, what do you trust more, global brands or governments to fix the problems of your country? Not surprisingly, in Japan was one of the highest numbers in terms of people saying, I trust global brands to fix the country. The number one global brand is Uniqlo. And the experience of the last few years tells Japanese people that, first of all, Japanese companies can fix us. And secondly, you know what? We also don't need other brands because when we ask the question, does globalization lead to innovation? The lowest answer was Japan.
That's because of the scales.
Next.
We'll discuss that later, Bill.
Sorry to ruin your speech there, Spawn.
Well, okay. You want to play a little bit? So give us a random letter.
Okay. I'm going to V for you. Why don't you give us something, for Christ's sake, for a change? Yeah.
Patrick, yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, actually, pick a letter for me.
Okay, V. I just said V.
V. Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Very comes to my mind. Vicious comes to my mind when I look at this group here. Variable.
Veritable?
Variable.
Ah, I thought you said veritable.
Variable.
Yeah, okay.
I'm writing a book right now on 21st century learning for parents, and there's a lot of variables in being a parent. And what the biggest challenge right now is there's a huge gap between the education that we received and the education that the children are receiving right now is basically stuck in the 20th century. And so that gap is huge, and we need to bridge that gap. and understand what those skills are and make sure that the schools and after-school programs and so on are providing a 21st century learning environment for our children. What most parents don't know is that children are only in school about 16% of the time, 1/6. If you take 200 days out of the year times 7, 1,400, divide that by 8,760, you get less than 16%. So parents as the primary educators really need to be the one to bridge that gap. All right. Go. You have one? You threw it at me? You have a random letter?
No, I've stopped.
You're done.
I've forgotten again.
You got tired? Are you tired?
I forgot.
You forgot about it? You got tired.
I forgot.
Dave?
Let me give you this parting thought as you go down the 51 floors. You get in the elevator, what do? Somebody's got to press the button, right? So actually it's been an interesting experience. The last year I've been living in Hong Kong, but it's spending a lot of time travelling between Hong Kong, Australia, the US and back here. And a lot of time in elevators and actually doing a little bit of an analysis of cultures and elevator practice. So if you think about Americans, typically when you get in an elevator, you turn, press the button of the floor you want to go to, take a step back. In Australia, watch Australians, we get in the elevator, we walk to the back of the thing and we think somebody else will press the button because we're too lazy to do it. Chinese, Hong Kong especially, get in the elevator and as soon as they walk in, no matter what's going on, other people trying to get in, other people, it doesn't matter, hit that press button, drive it nuts, right? No matter how many times you try to explain, the door's going to close automatically. No, forget that, it's got to drive it nuts. It's the perception that this is making we're more industrious and efficient. Japanese culture is, I get in and if anything, I press the door open button. I gravitate towards the door open button because Japanese is a very polite society. Have a look at it. Just think about it next time you're in an elevator and how it reflects the culture we're in. And like Bill and I, we are really lazy. Yeah.
Jesper?
What are you doing?
Whatever letter you want.
So S, my favorite letter, my random letter, Seikashubi. I think it's the most important change that is going on in Japan. You hear a lot of talk about corporate governance, about womenomics and all this wonderful stuff, which is great. But, in hard-nosed economics term, the most important thing that happened on the corporate side in Japan is that last autumn, Japan's largest employer, Hitachi Corporation, announced that for 16,000 of their senior managers, they will introduce pay for performance. Now, never mind why Hitachi needs 16,000 senior managers. We're still in Japan, but a switch away from seniority-based pay towards performance-based pay, that increases dramatically the probability that you are going to get a productivity revolution. When you sit down with the company and say, well, what does that actually mean? I mean, it sounds good, but what does it actually mean? What they tell you is that right now, for those 16,000, the average bonus, the contractual bonus, is 4.5 months of salary. What they're planning to do is divide into quintiles. And the bottom quintile is going to get 1.5, and the top quintile is going to get 7.5. If that really gets implemented, watch out. These guys will be super competitive. It's very interesting, you may have seen that 5 weeks ago, Toyota announced that they will shift 40% of their staff away from seniority to performance base. This is the true revolution. For Mr. Abe, all we need for him is to stay the course and to don't do anything weird. The real revolution is happening inside corporate Japan, where the scarcity of labor is beginning to force a rethink of how to sweat your most important asset harder, and that most important asset is you and me, even you.
Thank you. Okay,
So
I have,
in case you've forgotten.
R is I remembered. Okay.
R. Good.
So,
Is it an L or an R?
I know it's an R.
An R,
So
okay.
my R is, my letters are, and it's regenerative medicine, right? And people don't even know what, most people don't even know what it means, but what it means is, since Professor Yamanaka won the Nobel Prize with iPS stem cells, right? We are now about to have a revolution, not just an evolution, but a revolution in healthcare and whole medicine, right? So, and Japan is at the forefront of this. The Japanese parliament passed last year, for the first time in the world, a regulatory pathway which will allow you to do clinical trials with iPS stem cells, right? The first stem cell trial has begun with retina, and the lady who is blind looks like she'll be able to see again, okay? Another group has already got people who have 80-degree burns on your body. Usually you're dead within a very short time. If you can survive 3 weeks, they take the cells out, they grow the cells, make them into a sort of like a tatami mat, and then they slice it up and put it back on, and people have been completely cured of 80% burns. I mean, this is not evolution, this is revolution in Japan, right? And this will be the world leader. Nobody in the world is doing this at this point. That's my R.
Great. Some hope. Hope's important. So I think now we've got a bit of time left, and we intentionally did that. So if you wanted to ask a particular question or have one of the three gentlemen here elaborate on something or something different, try to use a letter when you ask the question, and let's try to balance it out so each one has an opportunity to share. So who would like to start with? Yeah.
C is for cats, D is for dogs, F is for friendship. How do you see pets playing a role in friendship?
Oh, it's huge. You know, the dynamics of the pet marketplace in Japan is extraordinary. We're starting to see this in some other North Asian countries and in Italy, which are the 5 next oldest countries in the world. But the same dynamic playing out where pets are replacing people, both in terms of loved ones, in terms of caretakers, in terms of just somebody to pat and hold. The single home structure is really important. There's an initiative going on for one of the world's leading pet food brands that I can't talk about, which is going to come out and basically target single people living alone. And the idea is to do it in association with people like moving companies and anybody else that's setting up your home, so that if they know you're living in a single household, it'll be, well, we'll give you the first month's pet food, cat food for free, you know, to feed your pet cat or your pet dog. Get a pet in the apartment with you. And I think this is going to be a huge dynamic of growth and caretaking.
Can I jump in
Sure.
as well on pet? As well as the Japanese population aging, so are Japanese pets. So the average age of a Japanese dog is now 9. And if you're 9 times 7, you're 63. You know, dogs want 7 times. So we now have a segmented market for aging pets as well, right? And the other part of this is pets die and they do poo-poo and do other things which you don't want them to. So the other area which is growing rapidly is companion robots. This is a huge growth industry, right? And that's another growth industry, in my opinion, for Japan. I mean, they are the world leaders in companion robots at this point, right? You want to have a pet comment as well?
No, I only like this fun statistics that there is more pet dogs and cats in Tokyo than there's children under the age of 18.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Greg Story from Dale Carnegie. One actually for Jesper. It's actually 2 letters, IT, but it's not the usual IT, it's inheritance tax.
Oh, God.
And talk about that in relationship to Japan trying to attract foreign workers to Japan,
Right.
trying to internationalize Japan, globalize Japan, yet having a regime which is going to be oppressive going forward if you spend longer than 5 years here. Just your thoughts on where those contradictions are going to meet.
It's interesting because, I mean, yes, you know, I mean, I obviously don't like the exit tax personally, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're just moving to a global standard there, right? The interesting thing about the inheritance tax in particular, yes, this country is increasing the inheritance tax. It's basically gone up from 50 to 55%, but what they have done at the same time, they have doubled the deductibility of residential real estate. So ironically, while increasing the headline rate, you've actually been very creative and you're doubling the deductibility so that now for residential property, so as a result of that, the most effective way to transfer wealth from one generation to the next is actually through home ownership or through residential property. And mark my words, this is going to be the year of a massive residential property boom precisely because of this inheritance tax change.
I actually have a question for Jesper again. I'm in actually residential...
25,000. I thought you were going to ask the target of the Nikkei.
No, we're actually a residential property asset manager.
Oh.
And we, just last week, obviously we rely on banks to finance our business. One of the banks that we do most of our business with came to us last week and said they're actually going to tighten the financing limits.
Right.
Do you have any insight or comment on, because you were just talking about residential deductions, if the banks are going to start tightening the financing limits on this, the amount of loans they're going to lend. This is kind of a problem, obviously, for my industry and for my job, but do you have any insight on this, on lending?
I hope that you can go to another bank. The nice thing is that you're quite right. The monsters, and I don't know what your bank is, and I don't really want to know, but the monsters, the three of them, are definitely tightening. There's no question about that. Against that, you've got the regionals, right? The regional banks, being very, very aggressive in moving into the metropolitan market areas, right? So you should be able, to actually get favorable terms coming through. If you don't, I know a little bank from America that is very happy to provide financing for a fee.
Thank you. D, for drugs. I think it was mentioned anxiety is a big problem in Japan. Should Japan be legalizing along the lines of what the US is doing these days?
Patrick, what's your point of view on that?
Absolutely not.
Look, I think the issue with drugs and for recreational purposes, look, let's face it, it's out there, it's happening. And it's the same in lots and lots of different societies around the world where the debate is on and in place. It's less likely to happen here than it is in some Western cultures in the immediate future. What we do know is that, when you're talking to young people, the interesting thing is the legal drugs and the fact that people are not taking those up. Alcohol, for example, cigarettes. Popular relaxation drugs that we've known for generations in most societies have been institutional for millennia are on the decline in this marketplace. Now, is that because people are less tense, or young people are less tense, or is it because it's related to what I mentioned earlier on, this down to earth, I sort of just go with the flow and don't get yourself so worked up society? Or are they just illegally buying a lot of dope on the side? I don't know. Yeah.
Can I come in? Actually, there's a thing called DAPO, right, which are drugs which are outside of the law, and they're called DAPO. And the police are really coming, because they've been causing traffic, not because of oldies, but traffic accidents and so on. So I do not see any loosening in Japan in regard to recreational drugs. It's just not going to happen, I don't think.
Can we ask why is that a personal interest of yours? Or? Go on. Next person.
Hi, Lance Gatling with Nixon, a cybersecurity company. I have I for Inaka. What's happening to the countryside? A lot of people see a hard end to all these small villages with aging populations, and I see more empty roads that I can ride my motorcycles on the weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, I can jump a little on that. We have also a lot of these places called shattadori, we call in Japanese, with all the streets have all the shutters are down. What we're seeing, I think, first of all, Abe is trying to create to revitalize each of these. And Ishiba, you saw recently, announced that each of you are going to have to compete, because some of you are going to go down the tubes. So you're going to have to learn how to compete to attract young people to come to your regional area. So I think there's a realization that has to happen. Now, in terms of IT, you know, one of the things which is already happening in some of these areas, we've got 45, 50% of the people are over the age of 65. Buses have stopped running, trains have stopped running, and how do you get the food delivered, right? So what they're doing now is keeping one people alive here who supply everything, and the oldies can't use computers, but they can use a TV screen. So on the TV screen now you'll see, you know, food, this, and this, and you press the button and they can arrange to order food to be delivered to you. So that's one way that they're looking to address this, using this, it's called the Japan Telecommunication something type thing. It's called JTTA, but not the Japan Table Tennis Association, something else. But that's a big growth area, I think, for Japan as well. Maybe you've got something for Abe-san, yeah.
I saw some work from a startup company who were looking at how to do short, small-term loans to encourage young people to do startups, but based out in the countryside in smaller villages. And what they found out was exactly what Bill said, was giving me the money to start it up is fine, but the truth is I can't get anywhere once I go to the village. And so fixing the infrastructure pieces again so that it becomes accessible is going to be really key to re-enlivening those places. And you can't wait until people have moved there. You've got to do it to get them to move there.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, do you want to comment on that, or are you okay?
No,
Pass.
look, I mean, revitalizing countries, I mean, go to Arkansas, it's the same problem, right? Go to East Germany, it's the same problem. These are big issues. The question is, do you get, private risk capital, private investment to actually come through? There are positive counterexamples. If you go to Sakata, up in the north, right? Cow Corporation last year built a new factory there for adult diapers. And, they've created 6,000 jobs, and the factory is booming. And you may be interested to know that an adult diaper has a higher profit margin than a Louis Vuitton bag. But it has to be, right, private-led investment. The reason Cow built the factory in Sakata is because of the proximity to what they perceive to be their biggest market, which is China.
And on that note, there was a number that you had as well. I think it was 142 or 144, is that right?
142, 144?
Wasn't there a number that was related to China that you had drawn out of the hat?
Oh, sorry, you're jumping, my God, from diapers to exchange rates.
Yes, that's a beautiful thing that is. So it's exchanging,
Exchanging, exactly. So if the yen has, what's that called? The yen has depreciated by about 50% against the renminbi, against the Chinese currency. What is interesting is that if the yen were to depreciate to 142, which is the number he gave me, 142, you can calculate if Japanese wages grow on average 1.5% and Chinese wages keep on growing at 12%. What you find is that by the time of the Tokyo Olympics, at 142, the cost of labor in the Chinese coastal areas is going to be exactly the same as the cost of labor is here in Japan.
That silenced the room, didn't it? I think we have one more question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Ed Rogers, I run an investment advisory business. I'm very curious, I guess I've got two letters, W and F, and it's not what it's a where question.
Go ahead.
You know that the 55-year-old plus crowd is the most energetic, the most excited, and as many of us know, they're also one of the wealthiest 55-year-old crowds in the world. We also know that most of their money right now sits in JGBs. Through one form or another, they've been very anti-risk. They've not been getting out there and spending money on a lot of things. Does your research lead you to conclude that maybe some of the revolutionary stuff that has been talked about will extend to these folks all of a sudden turning into risk takers, all of a sudden finding ways to finance new businesses?
I just want to clarify something, right? We have this perception in the business world that we say that Japanese people are not risk takers, and we say that Japanese over 55 are not risk takers. I just want to point out, we talk now about the dramatic change of China in the last 20 years, or India since it opened up about 25 years ago. No country went through dramatic change as much as this country did for 30 years. And the people that were at the heart and centre of that dramatic change were today's 55 to 70-year-olds. That generation of Japanese are the fastest changing generation and the most accepting of change of any generation mankind's ever seen.
Right, so I agree with that. I've been here for 30 years, so I've lived with it. My question is, are they going to spend differently now that they have this freedom? Because actually at the financial services level and at the spending level for products.
What are you asking them to spend on?
That's what I'm asking you, because you've done the research. What do you think they're going to spend on?
Apart from colostomy bags and adult diapers, you know, in the shorter term, travel, entertainment, restaurants world, the food world, not the day-to-day, not the JB product lines out of 7-Eleven, but what are we actually talking about? Moderately luxurious food products, etc. Little treats, luxuries, etc. If you're in that sort of business. The pet world, who actually can afford to have great pets? Robotic pets, etc. Robotic pets are great, but at the moment they actually, initial cost is a lot higher than it is to buy a dog, right? Even as expensive as dogs are in this country. There's a whole range of products and services in which this is a population that are willing to spend money, and they're willing to do things as long as you can provide the fact that, hey, it's going to make my life, fulfill my thing of being more energetic, looking forward, having a bit of fun now. Don't ask me to lay down big money for big long-term projects. That's a different issue. By the way, though, in terms of the shorter term, there's a misbelief. If you're in the white goods business, for example, there's been a misbelief for a long time that if you're in a brown goods, television sets, refrigerators, etc., I know somebody buys a TV set at refrigerator at 55, 60, you know, that'll be the last one just before they retire. They'll never buy a new one. That's crap. People in that age group are actually more likely to buy new electronic goods, etc., than their children and their grandchildren, and to renew them on an average turnover rate that's shorter than younger age groups. So an awful lot of categories, these are the people that are spending and are willing to spend if you make the right offers and the right things. The worst thing you can do is say, hey, you're getting on, you should do this. Hey, you've got a lot of grey hair, you should do that. Because like everybody else, the typical as I've pointed out many, many times, the typical 60-year-old retiree Japanese male has spent his whole career in training. It's called karaoke. He lives and breathes singing the same songs here and here that he did when he was 19. And inside, he's a 19-year-old busting to get out again. You just got to leverage that.
Yeah, can I just comment? I think if you go to the financial services side, however, right? You know, if you go back to the bubble, the stock market was 40,000, golf club membership was outrageous, etc. And housing was at this price. And as we've had this 30 years of deflation, I think a lot of people of that generation have lived through that, and they're not going to go. And the other thing is you do not know how long you're going to live. You know, you retire. You know, when they set the pension system up at 60 to retire, you were dead at 63. Now you may be dead at 75, 85, 90. You know, there were now 55, 60,000 people turning 100 last year. All right, so. How long is this money going to last for is the big issue. So, I mean, they will spend it on luxuries, but I think there's also a concern about not putting too much out there, right? I think we need to be careful on the financial side.
I'd like to give our three, I guess we could call panelists, even though it's definitely not the normal panel format, a great round of applause. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. Thank you for those who've joined online. I hope you've enjoyed it. Paul?
Patrick, thank you very much for wrangling this group.